Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and happy Friday. Thank you very much for joining us today. We encourage everyone, same as always, to keep their video on as it adds to the sense of community, and it would be wonderful to see you as well. Uh, Welcome. Sorry, I was just trying to let other people in as well. Yeah, so welcome to the next lecture in the MAHSC Inaugural Lecture Series, which celebrates the remarkable contribution of our honorary MAHSC clinical chairs. These honorary chairs are awarded annually by the Promotions Committee of the University of Manchester's Faculty of Biology, Medicine and Health to distinguished individuals across Greater Manchester. Each honoree has made significant contributions to their clinical specialty, demonstrating excellence in research, education, and clinical practice. Today, we are pleased to welcome Professor Cynthia Eccles from the School of Medical Sciences, Division of Cancer Sciences. And also, we are honored to have Professor Tony Hegarty with us in the call, who will kindly give us introduction to Cynthia. So please feel free to submit any question in the chat box and we will address them by the end of the talk. We look forward to celebrating the achievement of our professor today. I will now hand it over to Tony.
Thank you so much, Yasmin. Can everybody hear me? Yasmin, can you nod? Yes,
yes, I can. Yeah.
Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. It's, as Yasmin has said, these are highly distinguished members of our research community, recognized by the University of Manchester and belonging to our academic health sciences partners. And it is a particular delight this afternoon to introduce Professor Cynthia Eccles for a number of reasons. The first, of course, is that there is a natural assumption that professors are medically qualified, and yet the honor is bestowed upon allied health professionals as often as it is to clinicians. And it is a particular delight and personal pleasure to introduce Professor Eccles to you. She graduated from Queen's University at Kingston in 1996 and graduated with a BSc and an MA, or BA, I beg your pardon, one in science and the other, of course, in art. And then read for a PhD in 2016 from the University of Oxford. She has made her spiritual home the Christie Hospital and is a consultant research radiographer. I guess that for lay people, including myself, part of the treatment of cancer includes radiotherapy. And one immediately assumes, as I do from a position of absolute ignorance, that you switch on the button and the X-rays fire off and kill the tumor. But it's a much more sophisticated and complex operation. And Cynthia has made her life's research work honing the skills around this therapeutic modality, and is an international authority and has built a research group into double figures of active academics that are involved in making and streamlining and improving the delivery of X-ray therapy in an attempt to hone the skills and improve the therapeutic outcomes. She is the co-hub lead of the Manchester CR UK RadNet, Allied Health Professional Doctoral Academy, and has projects in motion management for abdominal radiotherapy and biologically adaptive radiotherapy for cervical cancer. She is a co-investigator and principal investigator on a number of research grant contracts and has published extensively in this field. She is literally a go-to person for this sort of research, and we are privileged to have her in Manchester. And it gives me great personal pleasure to introduce her as a new MAHSC professor to deliver her inaugural lecture. Professor Eccles, the floor is yours. Congratulations.
Can I just check? Cynthia, can you hear us? Oh, yeah, here we go. Thank you. I think you're still on mute, Cynthia, so we can't hear you.
Okay, sorry, thanks. We had the esteemed Professor Van Herk setting me up. Thanks for the very kind introduction and for the honorary clinical chair position. So I hope I can live up to the introduction. And I actually struggled with finding a title that I thought was appropriate or I could live up to. So you see the first slide is as of yet untitled. I put my CV into one of our favorite AI generators and asked them what they thought I should say my title was, and they came up with this, which is cute, but really not me. So then I said, can you remove the word radiographers and can you link it to something Canadian, please? And so they picked a song by iconic Canadian band, The Tragically Hip. Again, something a little bit challenging to live up to. So I've selected a different song by the same band called Looking for a Place to Happen. Because we're going to talk a little bit about my journey over the last 30-ish years. So the Hip are a Canadian band that we grew up listening to, and they're homegrown from Kingston, Ontario, which is where I did my undergraduate degrees. But they also have a long history of being proud and generous donors to the Canadian Cancer Society. And in 2017, their lead singer, Gord Downey, actually passed away following a battle with a brain tumor. But my personal connection with the Hip and cancer relates to Camp Trillium, which was the brainchild of a master's student and a pediatric oncologist from the University of Western Ontario, who looked for donations to fund a summer camp for children with and affected by cancer, where they could have a normal summer recreational experience. And as a student radiation therapist, I volunteered there. I had a cabin full of 6- and 7-year-old very smelly boys, and read The Hobbit many times over. And I went back in subsequent summers on my annual holidays to continue to work there. The second line of the song is actually making stops along the way, which I think when I was thinking about how I could package the last 30 years into a nice story, this did seem to really fit, because the work I've done, I think, probably shows the fact that I'm reasonably adaptable, although my team would probably say I'm not. But I look for opportunities and adapt my strategies in order to uptake those opportunities. So I did come up with a couple of themes, and I thought that threaded through the talk. A little bit about the evolution of the roles of radiographers in research. Most of my work has been around imaging and radiobiology, and that it's been to innovate and adapt in radiotherapy. And then a few lessons that I hope we can take away are the importance of research pathways for the entire interdisciplinary team, because it's interdisciplinary collaboration that drives our success in research and cancer care, and that we really need to work together to bridge new science into clinical practice, and your AHPs are the people who can really help drive that. So for those not familiar, radiographers are the people who, diagnostic radiographers are the people who take the images. Therapeutic radiographers are the people who can plan and deliver the treatment using high energy X-ray beams. We sit at the interface of medicine, patient care, and technology, and have specialist skills in treatment delivery, imaging, and patient interactions, including patient care and some basic nursing skills. This gives us unique capabilities and knowledge to place us at a very nice position in the research pathway to not only be involved with, but also lead impactful cancer research. So how did I get involved in cancer? And what have radiographers been doing in cancer research? Well, this is Terry Fox. He is a young Canadian who had his leg amputated after a battle with cancer and decided to run across the country from Newfoundland to Vancouver to raise money and awareness for cancer research. As a school child, we did penny drives, because in those days, pennies meant something, to raise money, and we'd all stand out on the streets when he came through our towns and donate to the man in the van behind him. But while I was doing that, and while Terry was trying to make his way across the country, there were radiographers already advocating for us to be involved in research and highlighting in particular the gaps in the involvement and the need for formal research pathways. So then through the 90s, well, I was lifeguarding in the summers, going to university and participating in varsity sports, studying just about enough to get by. More radiographers were identifying the barriers and motivations for us to be involved in research. And I think by the time I started my studies as a radiation therapist at the Princess Margaret in the mid-90s, particularly because the Princess Margaret had just moved from an old rundown hospital to this brand new purpose-built facility that was 21 floors of cancer care and cancer research. But also because radiotherapy was moving from the 2D world to the 3D world, so going from planar X-ray films and hand-drawn isodose distributions to 3D imaging and computed treatment planning systems. So it was a great time to join the world of radiotherapy. I think the lesson we can learn from these early research radiographers, or these early radiographers advocating for research, is that there's been a lack of formal research pathways, and understanding that helps us understand how our roles as researchers has evolved. So this is actually me on a Linux. In those days, we had to lift the Cerebend shielding into the head of the machine. But my first foray into radiotherapy research was my dissertation at the end of my program of study. And it again lent on my degree in health studies, looking at the nutritional needs of pediatric radiotherapy patients. And then the first research project I was involved in was again with pediatric patients. And you'll see later loops quite nicely to some current work we're doing. We worked as paid research assistants, not as academic partners, to irradiate some small animals while the scientists were looking at radio protective drugs to help prevent the deterioration of bone growth in pediatric patients having soft tissue masses next to the bone irradiated. And this will loop back in later. But this, again, I think the lesson here, or the theme here, is about bridging basic science into clinical practice. So we have basic scientists with the research question and clinical practitioners providing the care for the research subjects. It wasn't really until I started in an advanced integrated practice position in 2003 that my research career started taking off. And this was a novel experiment. I think there were 3 of us started in the first cohort with different projects. The AIP model in Toronto was aiming to provide opportunities for radiographers to subspecialize and develop academic careers. And I think one of the big differences in this model than in models that have evolved since is that the focus was on research, disseminating the research, then moving on to the next project, doing the research and disseminating the research. So they weren't fixed advanced clinical practitioner roles like we're familiar with now. And they all looked a little bit different. This is from a presentation that Liz Knowles used to do at one of our educational meetings. We'd split the radiographer. He spent approximately 50% of your time doing research, 50% of your time staying current with clinical at work. And then on the right-hand side of the screen is the schematic of the research radiographer at the top of the picture doing some work, developing protocols, developing educational material, disseminating it to a small group, and then becoming the point people for all the rest of the people on the treatment unit. And the initial experiment was written up by this team of educators and leaders in the department, and then they revisited it 10 years later when I think the number of radiographers was around 10 or 15 doing this, and to see how it had advanced practice and enhanced retention and recruitment. My role was with the liver saber team in the clinical trial by Dr. Laura Dawson. And it was basically to deliver the study and to work on any sort of the technical developments that were required to get the study through. In 2003, I think we were probably the first SABRE protocol in Canada. So there was a lot of work to do, and we made developments in mobilizing the patient, both internally and externally, introducing multimodality imaging throughout the treatment protocol, and then vital planning pieces. So I took a quick look, and I have co-authored 18 publications with Dr. Dawson. The first 9 were when I was working for her between 2003 and 2009. And then when I left the program and moved to the UK, I continued to publish from data collected during that period, a further 8 publications. And the most recent publication a few years ago was not unrelated, but not based on that data set. And it was a part of a collaboration with the MR-Linac Consortium. So what did I do? What did I write about? Well, a lot of things. And I did have a lot of help, although I did feel often it was just me doing everything all of the time. So we looked at things like, did better imaging make us more accurate for delivering treatment with patients in breath hold? Did using a compression plate to reduce motion change the position of the tumor during treatment? Did active breathing control, so assisted breath holds, actually work? Were patients able to do it? And we actually found that only about 62% of the patients had stable enough breath holds when we looked on imaging. So you really need to look on your imaging to make sure that they're really holding their breath. And then we started to get fancy. 4D CT was introduced, and so we wanted to see if we could do IV contrast enhanced 4D CT so we could actually see the tumor moving inside the liver in real time. I know this is old hat. I see the radiographers in the room going, yeah, yeah, yeah. But this was like 2005, guys. Yeah, so at the time it was really bleeding edge. You know, then when we first started doing our SABRE, we did forward planning with manually placed beams. So we then had to study whether or not IMRT, this newfangled way of delivering treatment, was any better than me sitting there picking out beam angles. And then this was a piece of work that we did, and we didn't publish it to 2009, but for a long time, it was my very favorite piece of work. We looked at the use of diffusion-weighted MRI in liver cancer to see if we could use it to predict response. So for those not familiar, diffusion-weighted MRI looks at the motility of water in particular tissues or structures. So say if there's a lot more of water and it shows up as a bright spot, you might have an inflammatory response or a swelling. If you have a dark spot or a void, it usually means that there's restricted motion. So it could be a tumor death or cell death in that area. So we looked at imaging over before treatment, during treatment, and after treatment. And we looked at areas in the heart of the tumor that got the most dose, at the edge of the tumor that got a little bit of dose, in liver that didn't get very much dose at all, and in the spleen. And although it was a very small patient population and heterogeneous, we did see a trend that patients who responded to treatment had a higher change in the diffusion-weighted imaging values from baseline to week 1 of treatment. And then so we thought we were experts in functional imaging. And so we leapt way forward. And in some of my spare time, I teamed up with Dr. Drew Hope and some of our medical MRI physicists to see if we could collect some preliminary data on the feasibility of using oxygen-enhanced MRI to support a grant application that we put forth. The grant application wasn't successful, but I did manage to scale that wall without falling, so wins all around. And then shortly after that, I left Toronto and moved to Oxford to take up a job supporting the team in Oxford, looking at novel radiosensitizers and radiotherapy treatment combinations. So my day job was to help deliver these protocols and to help drive any modernization that the department needed in terms of IMRT and IGRT so that we could get these protocols delivered. And so about a year into my stay there, I started my doctorate, and this was the original project. We spent a year putting together or revitalizing a similar protocol in lung. It was a 3x3 dose escalation matrix study. It was approved. Professor Vallis was in the clinic recruiting the first patient, and the clinical trials unit told us that they were folding. So it felt a little bit disappointing, but we continued to do work. So like I said, I am adaptable, and one of my strengths is finding opportunities. So using data that was already being collected in other projects couldn't be used for my PhD, but we looked at some functional imaging, so some PET imaging to look at target delineation in the pancreas. And then we continued some clinical work, starting with doing a critical review of the literature for both palliative and radical treatment of the pancreas. Was their first publication out of that group. We then did some planning studies looking at the impact of different contouring guidelines on how much normal tissue got irradiated. We looked at different ways to rank and evaluate plans using different radiobiological endpoints and your more traditional DVH alignments. And then whilst I was doing my PhD, I sort of took on my first lead role. I got to design a research radiographer job and hire someone into post, who then took over some of the work that I was doing in the clinic, and I got to help supervise her to write her first paper. In the meantime, I did end up doing my PhD. So we basically took our clinical trial that we wanted to do, and because my supervisors had lab space and lab licenses, we did the reverse of what is normally done, and we put it into mice. So we were looking at normal tissue toxicities in the lung following treatment with and without novel radiosensitizers, particularly ones that inhibited the PI3 kinase pathway. So we had this is a very generalized overview. We did a number of studies with a number of drugs and a number of dose fractionations. So we did single fractions, we did fractionated treatments. So basically we imaged the mouse on CT and MRI. We did plethysmography, so breathing rates. And then at each time point, we sacrificed a certain number of animals to do histopathological evaluations as well. And what we found out wasn't terribly surprising, but that the incidence of radiation-induced lung toxicity following single lung irradiation was similar. Found with a similar rate on no matter what evaluation tool we used. But more importantly, what we did, this was the first time the group at the lab had developed a high throughput multimodality imaging program for longitudinal investigations of normal tissue toxicity in a preclinical model. So I think in terms of the teamwork, it was really important piece of work. And more importantly, my supervisors have given me some words to remember, and I don't know if they even ever remember saying these, but these are words that have stuck with me. Professor McKenna used to say, more radiobiology, less rowing. I spent a lot of time on the Thames and other pieces of water while I was there, earning a faux blue in lightweight women's rowing. And then Professor Realis said, sometimes wine helps you think. She said many other wise things, but this is the one that stuck with me on graduating. So moving on from there, I took a job at the Royal Marsden in Sutton, and the main objective of that role was to help do the clinical implementation of the MR-Linac and the associated technologies. Whilst I was there, we spent some time developing a number. I think there are 5 clinical trials we wrote while I was there, mostly imaging trials. And then working with my partners in radiology, namely Erica Skur, to develop an educational framework for therapeutic radiographers working in MR-guided radiotherapy. That was a two and a half year post. And then I got a call from the Christie saying they wanted a head of radiotherapy research and development. And would I be interested? So I said yes, and then they hired me. And although the remit of the job was quite broad, a lot of my work has been spent in MR-guided and adaptive radiotherapy. And recently, earlier this year, we celebrated 5 clinical years with MR-Linac, and there's some milestones that we've hit just on some slides designed by our comms team. Notably, everyone on the MR-Linac is currently treated on a research study. So we've also written some research studies, and we've hired research radiographers through large infrastructure grants to help support this work. Some work that I'm particularly interested in and that we've recently submitted an application to do is tying in the radiobiology and the imaging and trying to build off the back of some of the work some of our team members have done, optimizing MR and use MR to look at the microbiome. So we proposed that we do some blood and urine sampling, we do some dietary sampling, and we do some imaging, and then we hand everything over to Eliana, who does all the computational magic. and hopefully, ideally, what we want to be able to see is what's going on with the microbiome that could influence the response to radiotherapy treatment without having to take blood samples or stool samples or urine samples, which would be a lot easier and more friendly for the patients. And if this works in the pancreas, maybe we'll move on to other tumor sites. So another big piece of work that I've been involved with at the Christie and the University of Manchester is the development of our AHP Doctoral Academy. This wasn't my brainchild. I was invited to help lead it whilst a major infrastructure grant was being written. I'm the only AHP on that team. Hopefully there'll be more one day. But we thought, Manchester being the largest radiotherapy center in Europe was a great place to house this because we have lots of patients, we have lots of research, and we have lots of great staff. So we designed a doctoral academy dedicated to allied health professionals. At the moment, it's primarily therapeutic radiographers, but we're open to welcoming anyone working in radiotherapy related research that doesn't otherwise have a pathway. We want to use the big data that other members of our team are collecting. We want to use our expertise in functional guided MRI and MR guided radiotherapy. And we're hoping that we might be able to encourage people to transcend the traditional roles or foci of radiographer research and sort of think outside the box. So this is what it looks like. And we've had a few success stories, although the main focus was getting funding to fund the first 2 PhD projects. We really early on recognized the need to have a way to filter radiographers and other AHPs into the PhDs and then create positions when they come out. So my post is one of those first positions to have a clinical academic post, and I act as a supervisor for the students on this program, and I help co-supervise other students in the radiotherapy related research as well. And one day, as we get a critical mass, there'll be other radiographers doing this also. So just a few of our success stories. We have we co-supervise or clinically supervise students from other universities doing radiotherapy masters. So one of those students that we worked with was Lucy Davies, who was part of our trials team. She did some work looking at positioning and imaging for partial breast radiation on the MR-Linac. And then she liked doing a bit of research, leading a bit of her own research. So she applied for and was successful in getting a personal award to do a pre-doctoral fellowship, where she collected data to support her application for a PhD fellowship, which she was successful at and has started with us just last month, 2 months ago. So I think that's a successful story because she's continued to work with us. And if you notice, I did flash that quite quickly. Her work is looking at facial asymmetry in pediatric patients who've gone through, or survivors of pediatric radiotherapy. Our next success story was also a master's student who came through a different route, did a master's project with Marianne Asnar and myself. Amira Al-Shanrami. She looked at the association between radiotherapy doses to bone marrow and patients reporting fatigue and prostate cancer. and she had so much fun. She applied to her government funding scheme and was awarded funding for a PhD project, which she's currently in her final year of, looking at adaptive radiotherapy strategies in cervical cancer, mostly on the MR-Linac. Our next story was not quite a success. We had a funded student who was unable for various reasons to complete the PhD, but we do have a very savvy team of project managers and support staff who were able to have that money realigned so we could appoint our very first postdoctoral research associate, Rakaya Shabir, who's looking at dose accumulation in patients treated on the MR-Linac, focusing on the pancreas, bladder, and cervix. And then the last one I'll just quickly show is Marie Daly. She was our very first PhD student. She is our very first PhD student to graduate, and in a nice, or well, successfully pass her Viva. She's currently writing her corrections. She looked at work in my old field of radiotherapy respiratory motion in the abdomen, did some novel work looking at using fat quantification on the MR-Linac and seeing if that impacted respiratory motion management. And then she looked at motion management strategies across different imaging modalities and how they impacted clinician contouring, among a few other things. So she is going to join us in January as a postdoc research fellow as well. So I think we're only 4 years in, but it seems fairly successful at the moment. And then, of course, the success of the Academy extends out to the wider team of research radiographers. So we have a team that focuses in 2 main areas, and we have 2 deputies or principal radiographers, Lisa McDade and Julie Webb, and both of them manage different areas of the team. So Julie's team are responsible for the delivery of clinical trials, although they do have academic interests and will occasionally publish papers and presentations. And they back us up on the MR-Linac. We have research and MR-Linac radiographers whose job is to deliver treatment to patients on clinical trials on the MR-Linac, and they also take on some academic work as well. We have 2 radiographers who sit between the 2 halves of the team that do some work on the MR-Linac and some work in trials. And then we have the Academy, and we have the opportunity, we get some funding from the local Biomedical Research Council to invite AHPs in and do taster sessions with us. We did some prior to COVID, and we have 2 joining us in the new year. We also extend outside of Manchester and do co-supervision or clinical supervision of students in radiotherapy, radiology on their master's dissertations. And then we do general teaching, curriculum development, grants, peer reviews, all sorts of other things at a local, national, and international level. So this sort of gives the people going through the academy an idea of where they could sit once they're finished, if they don't want to go back to general clinical practice. So in summary, when I'm not here, I have been trained very well with the frisbee by my border collie. He likes to go in the muddiest of puddles only. In summary, I think my work has, I've contributed to the field in technical innovations in radiotherapy, adaptive radiotherapy, and bioadaptive radiotherapy through some of the publications and supervision, which is more of what happens now of some of our colleagues. So with that, I'm going to close and say thanks to everyone. And hope I either mentioned or got a photo of everyone. If I didn't, it wasn't intentional. I just didn't dare try to write everybody's name because I knew I would forget someone, and that would be very obvious. So thanks for your attention, and I'll take any questions, I suppose.
Brilliant. What a story. Fantastic. Professor Eccles, that was wonderful. Thank you. Do we have any questions, Yasmin?
I can't see any question in the chat box, but so from the audience, please feel free if you do have any question for Professor Eccles. So you can just, let us know. I probably would give it a thought if you don't mind, Tony. So,
Beg your pardon?
yeah, sorry, can I just have a question for
Yeah.
Cynthia? Thank
Yeah.
you so much, Cynthia. It was a wonderful lecture. And I was just interested to know if you could share your maybe future work plans, potential opportunities, innovative ideas, dreams, ambitions in your field.
That's 3 questions.
Oh my God. My apologies.
Well, I think, I'd really like to, from the work that we propose in the Ontario project, I'd really like to explore some of the radiobiology by imaging, and do some of that work and move a little bit away from some of the technical radiotherapy. I mean, we have a team who's doing really great stuff in that area. And then I think my ultimate dream is to have a few of these guys graduate from their PhDs and postdocs and support me supporting others, as we're coming up onto a bit of a critical mass.
Do you have a view, Cynthia, on targeting? Does your research extend into that?
Yeah, it's all about targeting. Sorry, yeah. I didn't make that clear.
No, I mean, the sort of local type, with antibodies and things like that.
Yeah, so here in Manchester, we do most of our work is immunotherapy and out of associated with the Villages lab. But as you saw, my PhD was on radiosensitizers and targeted agents. And yeah, I'd really like to get back to that. But I think the focus in Manchester is more immunotherapy, which is it's not entirely systemic, but it's a little bit more systemic. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. But I mean, the message that clearly comes across is that radiotherapy is still in the vanguard of the treatment of cancer.
Yeah. Over 50% of the patients with cancer get radiotherapy either in a radical or a palliative fashion. And I think, the better, it sort of goes cyclically in innovations in radiotherapy. You get a little bit of knowledge about the biology, and then you adapt the tools such as the imaging techniques, and then you adapt the treatment delivery tools. So like the innovation of multi-lead collimation was a big thing. We could conform treatment even better, so we've got protons here. So it's a bit cyclical. I think we're in a bit of a technical adaptation phase, but we'll learn about the biology by the changes we make using the technology.
Sure, and a captive population. This is the wonderful thing about the Northwest. We've got tremendously settled population, and therefore, and they're so willing to volunteer for research purposes. So it's ripe for what you're doing. It's fantastic. Yasmin, have we got anything else?
No, I don't think we do have any more questions. There's just one message for you, Cynthia, in the chat box if you want to have a look.
Read it out.
Okay, so if there's no more question, I believe this brings our events to a close. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Tony, and also thank you so much, Cynthia, for your time, and also everyone for joining us, and congratulations again to the Professor Cynthia Eccles. So please keep an eye out for the next lecture in our MAHSC Inaugural Lecture Series taking place in January 2025, where we celebrate our other honorary clinical chairs. So we wish you all a very wonderful festive break and a Merry Christmas. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Oh,